Hey, hi, hello. It's Tokencarnie. Welcome back to another episode of Professionally Unprofessional. Today is our final episode with Chloe from Barrio Letterpress, and in today's episode we're talking about more of the things that went into building Barrio and less about the actual letterpress company. So if you want to learn more about why Chloe decided to go this way, how her being a teacher influences this, and her bonus tip for anybody who's trying to start their own career, make sure you stay tuned after this. Alright guys, this is the final episode of our interview with Chloe. If you missed the first two episodes, you can find them linked up here in the cards or in the description box below, so make sure you check those out. Don't forget to check out the Redhead Runaway Podcast, available on your favorite streaming site. Before we jump into the interview, don't forget to like and subscribe this channel. It really does help Redhead Runaway get out there and get visible on the YouTube platform.
And I teach high school, like 11th grade. So my students are right at that cusp of like, what the fuck do I do with myself? And I feel like I'm a really good role model in that I try as best as I can to impress upon them that there's no like one size fits all response to that question. No. And right now we're even like, I have them researching whether or not students should go to college straight out of high school. And so many of them are coming to the conclusion that like, I never thought I wanted to do anything besides go to college, but in doing the research, you know, I'm finding that there are other pathways to success. And I'm over here like, I'm a teacher. Am I going to sit here and say, like, if I was 18 years old again, I would decide not to go to college? 100% no, because I love learning and I love being in the classroom. And to me, that was like, that's why I went to school. That's why I got a master's degree. Like, I love being in the classroom as a student.
But that's you.
And exactly.
It's different, right? It's different.
And that's something that I'm so like passionate about, is that it's not that doesn't inherently mean everyone should do it. Like I have so many family members who are successful at what they do, but never went to school. Like I have a certain family member who's I think like fourth in command at like a pretty well established corporation and does not have a legitimate high school diploma.
I'm in my family. I'm the first person in my family to graduate college. And I'm talking like grandparents down. Like my grandfather, he went to college and he did everything. But other than that, I'm the first one. And then my siblings, you know, they've all gone to college, and Abby's in college right now. Like they're all doing their thing. But for me, I went to college because I had to. I did not go to college for any other purpose. Like my parents are like, you're going to college or you're joining the military. Didn't get a choice. And I was just like, oh, heard. So I went and did circus and
military.
Theater. Could you imagine me? They'd be like, grab this, and I'd be like, Like it's not.
No. You come grab that for me, please.
Like hard pass.
And my whole thing, even with, you know, I've been fortunate to work with students who, for lack of a better term, like they've always just been told like college is the pinnacle, right? Like you should be planning to go to college. And one of my, you know, I always say that this is like a benefit of being a younger teacher, but I'll be like, sorry, but people lie. And I just like straight up tell them, I'm like,
true.
I can't sit here and say, and then the other reality is a lot of the students I work with, they're not college ready in terms of like academic ability.
Well, and so the financial on top of it. Like college is expensive, and moving from the East Coast to the West Coast, seeing all these people out here, they're like, you have what degree? You have what minor? You did all of this? Like that's crazy, because most of the people out here don't. But it's so incredibly expensive, and I'm a huge like, yes, you should go to college. It was a brilliant experience. I loved every second of it. I like learning. I would go back if I could. But if it's a choice between getting a college education or putting yourself in so much debt and stress and all this, no, you don't need to do that.
It's me, the poster child for student debt.
Right. Like you don't need to do those things to be successful. There are other ways to do it. And I love it.
One of the things that always, you know, I have to have like very open and candid conversations about is like, if I have a student who says like, I'm going to be a doctor, and I, you know, as a professional, like I'm a special ed teacher, I have I have 2 degrees in education. Like I have to use my, like, obviously in a tactful and professional way, I have to let kids know that like the expectations around becoming a doctor and like going to medical school, that it's not just like I'm going to become a doctor. Like, if you can't even handle the homework assignment I'm giving you right now, shorty, you better come up with a different plan. And that is really like,
I love you, but no.
And it's not I always tell them, I'm like, I fucking hope that one day you walk through my door in a white coat and prove me wrong. I like, that is my dream. That would be like, I wouldn't even be salty about it. I'm gonna take your
even better. Have one of your students have you print up their medical invitations for their graduation party. Just be like, maybe eat that. Mm-hmm.
Hire Delicious. Me. It's fine with your new doctor salary. You'll be making way more money than me. But sometimes I'm like, you know what? People really are not having these candid conversations. Like, people are being like, okay, you want to be a doctor? That's awesome. I'm like, wait. You know, not everyone can become a doctor. We need tradesmen. We need mechanics. We need, you know, people who are going to work for the cable company. Like, we need that stuff.
I think it's a major difference too, because when you and I went to college, because we went around at the same time, right? Because so we went at the same time for it, and for us it was like, this is what you have to do, there are no other options. And now that we've gone through it and we're the ones telling it, like, this current generation that's going through, y'all don't need the same, like, the world has changed, as the poor millennials have noticed.
I know. I'm always like, you Gen Z people have no idea. You have no idea. And my students are like, shut up, Mrs. SJ. I'm like, listen, I'm just saying.
I just love when you go to teach someone, especially me when I was coaching, you know, there's only like a 5 to 10 year gap between us. And when we were in school and had teachers that were 26 and whatever teaching, we were just like, whatever, you're so young, this is so cool. But now we're just like, no, listen, I understand that we're the same age. Like, I understand that we could probably go get food or like a drink after this, but I need you to pay attention to me and understand that the world lies. Lies.
I always tell them, I'm like, you see that little twitch in my eye that pops up when I'm talking about like debt and like banks? Okay, so perfect example. One day I'm giving this lesson about word choice. And so, you know, we're talking about when people are trying to be persuasive and they want to be powerful speakers, they choose words that have emotional ties. So I put up a section of a speech by Martin Luther King. And the line that sticks out in my mind, because it was really like, I actually broke down and cried after this lesson, and I'll get to why. So the line is, we have come here today to America's capital to cash a check. And in my head, I'm like, oh, that's so fucking powerful. Like, he's talking about like what African Americans are owed by the government, right? Like, you have to give us this. My students read that shit and thought he was talking about going to a bank. Like an actual bank, like Chase Bank.
Just the gap in what you had to say right there.
And I was like, oh my word. Y'all motherfuckers think he's talking about a check, like a paper check. Why would you think that? And so I'm like, all right, process, Chloe, quick. Like, how do we fix this? Because, you know, when you're reading this and you're thinking about, I'm asking them all these like critical questions, like, what is owed to them? And they're like, well, how much money is the check for? I'm like,
reparations don't have a cost, y'all.
Still think that there's a physical check involved in this? Oh, dear God. So then I'm like, let's talk about what a metaphor is, friends. This is not a physical check. And, you know, just, I have to put a little disclaimer on this. Like, sometimes I really will give it to my students straight and be like, people did you dirty in your early years of schooling, because you should know this. And so that was one of those moments where I had to take my teacher hat off, put on my I'm not that much older than you hat, and be like, listen to me. Listen, like, really hear the words that I'm saying.
Counselor Chloe popped out. You can do that if you want, but you won't regret it.
And I said, I was like, listen, I love you. I'm sorry to say this, but there's no fucking bank involved. Like, we are not at the bank. I pulled up a picture of the March on Washington. I was like, we are standing in the nation's capital at the Washington Monument right now. Like, this is where we are. We are not at Chase. We are not at Wells Fargo. Okay, so get that shit out of your head. And really stick with me now. And all my students are people of color. So I'm over here like, oh my God, what are you talking about? Like, this is our history. You need to be like savvy to this.
See, and I think that's another thing, because obviously I can't speak to people of color because, like, I'm lacking all of it. But I can speak to queer culture because that is where I tie in. So I see millennials, not millennials, I see Gen Z and younger, and they're talking about, they're like, yes, sis, let's kiki. And they know this. And I'm like, oh, so you know about Marsha? And they're like, Marsha who? And I'm just like, Marsha P. The black trans woman that gave you the rights that you have. Or when white women or anything, and I've done this, I've done this in other podcasts. I was on one where I literally looked right into the microphone and I was like, white women, stop using queer language if you're not going to respect queer women of color, because that is where it comes from.
Yes.
And it's just completely, and yes, it's not all Gen Z.
My biggest thing, so when I first started teaching, I was 22 and my students were 19. And that was like a whole...
It's like a 3 to 4 year gap.
Yeah, and I would be like, oh my God, why are you like this? And, you know, so one
and then
of the
you remember.
Yeah, well, the first thing I had to like acknowledge, and I often acknowledge it publicly with my students, was that I have education privilege in that my parents had the means to move us away from like what they consider to be poor learning environments.
Right.
And so that's something I'm like very vocal about. And, you know, that's why when I talk about code switching in my classroom, because like I when I first started teaching, I was working with students who were incarcerated, and, you know, all of the different dynamics that would play into that of like, you know, we were experiencing homelessness, and then I joined a gang, and then this happened, and then I got arrested, and now I'm in jail. And like, it was just, there was so much stuff that I was like, damn, that easily could have been me if my parents hadn't been like, this school system sucks, we need to move.
Can you take a second, because I understand exactly what you're saying, but can you take a second to explain what code switching is for those people that don't know?
Sure. So code switching is when, you know, we take the different experiences, and especially like vernacular based language, and kind of switch throughout the course of the day. So, you know, when I'm sitting with my friends and I'm like, oh, she ain't shit for doing that, blah, 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 that I wouldn't necessarily, like, I wouldn't talk to my boss and be like, yes, that lesson plan was shit. Like, but, you know, it's a concept that, like, we use different language in different settings.
For white people, it's the wearing different hats.
There you go. So one of my many hats is that I'm from Uptown Manhattan, and, you know, I only spent a short amount of time like living there physically, because that's when my parents started to say, okay, we don't want them in the same school system that we grew up in. But like, I see my parents as two like very intelligent individuals, and I'm like, y'all made it out, so why couldn't we? But then I look at, you know, the educational experiences that I had in other places, and I'm like, damn, I wonder if I would have the capacity to run multiple businesses while also being a, you know, like a professional teacher or educator all simultaneously if I had not had the education experiences that I had that prepared me for that. And so sometimes I'm like, oh, you guys like made me move to this super white town where I felt out of place my whole life. And then other times I'm like, thank you.
I think that's a really good point. I think another thing with code switching too that most people don't get is it involves like grammatical structure and dialect as well. For example, when people complain about like, I'm gonna ask you something, or I'm finna do this, and like, it's things that we use on a regular basis. And as a teacher, you can correct me on this one, or not. As a teacher of color, you can correct me on this. There's a complete difference between like speaking correctly and grammatically, and understanding that grammar is also a set of control that is imposed on people to do that. And you know me, I love languages and I love grammar, and I like to be proper in the way that I speak, because I prefer the education side of it. But that doesn't take away from people who do speak with a specific way. Like, it doesn't make them incorrect.
Correct. And so that's the whole thing that I talk about with my students, is like, your way of understanding the world is not wrong. Like, it's not inherently wrong because it doesn't match like the standard of what's out there. But, you know, there are certain rules. I agree, where like, you know, I had a student, this is really funny. I had a student submit an essay the other day that was like, and it said, and you know, Troy, he be bugging. And I was like, bro.
My guy. My guy.
I literally commented, we use like Google Docs, and I commented, I'm like, bro, are you joking me right now? Take that shit out. And he was like, but come on, Miss SJ, like, I'm just, you know, I'm kicking it, I'm writing it, and it's helping me. I'm like, no.
You gotta code switch it. You gotta make it so it fits in.
I'm like, okay, so find an appropriate way, a school appropriate way to say he be bugging. And so we sat and we talked and we're like, okay, so what he came up with was Troy occasionally like acts out against his family members or something like that. And I was like, see, like, you don't have to be talking all crazy in your damn essay, you dummy. Like,
right. And code switching is really cool in the sense that it helps break communication barriers, because if you can understand what these things mean, like there's this complete difference where it's almost like a sign of respect, not in the sense of what we grew up with, where like you respect this person because they're in a position of power. It makes them relatable, and then there's this instant conference of this instant like transference of respect, where if I'm talking to any of your students, or if you're talking to them and we're saying this thing and like this is what it is, and you turn around and be like, listen, y'all are acting dumb, we need to break this down, like why are you acting crazy? It's one of those moments where they're like, oh, you're just trying to teach us, you're not trying to talk down to us or anything, like you're on our level and you're trying to help us understand. And that's huge. And tying that back into what you do with your letterpress, do you feel that you use your teaching abilities and code switching and everything to help personalize what you do and to make it more relatable to other people?
Absolutely. I mean, I never, and if you think back to like where we first met, like I never considered myself a people person until I realized like how, because I'm a strong communicator, I don't necessarily have to like people, but I can get along with people, and that's fine. And
that was you 100% at camp. I specifically remember because that's where we met, for everyone paying attention. We were both camp counselors. One of the funniest things I ever saw you do is when you were with all of your campers, they were talking about things they wanted to do, and you were like, that sounds like a really dumb idea, we should try something else, and like turned and kept going. And I was just like, I love her. Because you just didn't, like you let them finish and you're like, cool, but we're not doing that, and like kept going. And I think that reflects even like camp, right? Like that was such a different world from what I experienced. I remember being like, damn, this camp costs how much a week? Like people are sending their kids for the whole summer. How much money your parents make? Like what the fuck? That was a huge thing, because I would have never been able, like my summer camp experience was scout camp, which was like $300 for 2 weeks. You know what I mean? Or any other thing I fundraise. And it's not saying that like I grew up poor or anything like that. It was just one of those things where you get to, if I didn't work at that camp, I would have never been able to experience a camp like that. And that was crazy.
I didn't grow up poor either, but I'm one of four. Like there's somebody wasn't going to camp.
Same.
And we went to like daycare programs. We went to, summer camp that was day camp, but we always, we're free and reduced lunch kids. Like I'm just going to put it out there.
Mm-hmm.
And that's fine. Like it didn't change my perspective, but I do remember like when I met a lot of my students, being that they were on the lower like socioeconomic status side of life, like I just remember like my first step into the classroom being like, damn, there are some things I 100% connect with my students about. There are other things I really truly need to check my privilege about. And that wasn't it wasn't a place where I've found myself where I'm like in a position of power and points of privilege, because as a woman of color, like there aren't many fields or places in life where I'm like the person with power, and as much as I hate to admit that, but it's just like society, right? And so I thought like I could really do a lot of damage if I'm not careful in this environment. And so kind of forgot what we were talking about originally, why I brought them up, but when it comes to code switching and like making sure that I'm transparent about like that all of the advice I give for my students and in life and with my clients, even it's done with love. Like I'm just using the experience I have, the understanding I have, the knowledge that I've collected over years and years of doing this work, and kind of like rolling that all up into one.
I think it makes you much more relatable too. Like you being a teacher lets you do it. Like you on your Instagram and your Facebook page, you do so much behind the scenes education of what letterpress is, and it really makes you much more interesting, because it's created this thing where although you're relatively new at this, although this is not something that you have a ton of experience with, you are an expert in your field because you're taking the moment to teach other people. And one of the coaches that I love dearly and have spoken to, she always says that to be a coach, you have to be one step ahead of the other person. Like, you don't have to be professional. You don't have to have everything put together. You just have to be one step in front of where this other person is, because they're like, they don't know. They don't care.
That's a really good thing to keep in mind.
I love it. That's the whole thing with this.
Like, imposter syndrome rears its ugly head sometimes when I'm like, oh shit, there's people who have been doing this for 5 years versus my 2.5. And I'm like, who cares? Like, you know what I mean? But it doesn't take away the fact that I've done research. Even graphic design, it took me so many years to say I'm a graphic designer, when I kid you not, I've been graphic designing since I was making MySpace layouts at age 12.
See, and for me, I feel like that's something that was easy, because going through acting school and circus performance and everything, we are always taught, you know, people say like, oh, you're aspiring to be an actor. He wants to be an actor. Like, no, I have a degree. I do this. Like, I do this professionally. Like, I'm an actor. Do I make a ton of money off of whatever I'm doing? That's literally, one, none of your business. And two, you don't have to be, you don't, I mean, for real though, you don't have to be successful at something to still be that thing. And I'm not saying like, oh, I can throw a ball terribly and become a baseball pitcher, but you can be an actor that only acts in community theater and only does little things for a podcaster like this that has 10 listeners and still be an actor, a podcaster. It's this whole mentality of growing up and being taught like, oh, I want to be this, or I'm trying to be this, completely takes away from that. And like, your students, when you walk in and they're already they grew up in a poor environment, they already have this defeatist mentality that this is as far 100%. As I can go. They're like, this is all I can do. Because I know that when I went to school and everything, it was straight up like, either I do this or I'm not successful. And then I just started going off and doing my own thing and being ridiculous and being this rebel that my brand started from. And then everyone was like, I like what you're doing, can you teach me more? And it's one of those things where everything that we were taught growing up, given our parents and the generations before us were still supportive of us, they wanted the best for us because they thought that best was all the way up here. Whereas you and I look at it, do I have a place to live? Do I have enough money? Like, even if I'm living paycheck to paycheck, am I living happy in what I'm doing?
Not living paycheck to paycheck.
In this economy?
Bank accounts. You a liar.
In this economy? No. But it's just that mentality of, we were taught that you have to have a big house and have all these things. And then we grew up and we realized right off the bat, those things aren't obtainable. You can't have them. And so we made a happiness.
At least not right now.
No, and in the future, whatever. But I'm not gonna rank it by the fact that I graduated college and didn't have a professional job right off the bat and be like, okay, so this means I'm not successful. Like, I'm 29, I'm building this, I'm doing what I can, I'm making things happen. And every 100%. Single step of the way, I've looked at it and been like, this is whatever. But then other people hear my story or other people hear your story and they're like, it is so crazy that you've done those things. How did you do them? And 100%. Now we're experts on the topic.
And you know what's funny is, like, this is perfectly tying into something I just experienced today. So I had an observation today. And if you're familiar at all, listeners, Ryan, with like teacher observations.
Oh, yeah.
The culture around it is like, somebody's going to come and like wag their finger in your face and tell you what you're not doing right. And for me, I never had that mentality because I'm like, well, I'm a new teacher. Like, I have a lot to learn, but I also know that I'm like intrinsically very good at teaching. Mm-hmm. It's just like a natural skill that I have. It's why I've worked at summer camps. It's why I'm like, I've been a certified babysitter since I was 12. Like, there are things that are part of teaching that are just part of my like nature. And my colleagues, we have a group chat because we're all working remotely. And my colleagues were like, make sure you do this. And, you know, like kind of trying to bolster the vibe. And mm-hmm. I don't really sweat that kind of stuff. I'm like, okay,
I don't either.
Observation, like, bring it on. I'm doing my job right. I know it. So whatever.
And if I'm not, tell me and I can fix it. But like, I don't, exactly. Like, you can't yell at me if I don't know what I'm doing.
Exactly. And I don't see the recommendations or like the correction of a behavior or a pattern or a practice as punishment. I'm open. I'm willing to learn. And
that's how you learn. Like, you have to mess up. I'm a kinesthetic learner. And when I explain to people the different types, because, you know, you got your visual learners that they have to see it. You've got your audio learners who have to hear it. And you have your kinesthetic learners, which I like to tell people, we are the type of people that we have to do it, fuck it up, and learn how to fix it. And that's how I've been my entire time. And just I resonate with that so very much, especially with me, being homeless and all these other things and coming back from what I've had and like dealing with my medical injury and everything. It's literally never been oh my God, my life has to stop because everything's messed up. It's always just been like, cool, now what? Cool, now what?
Like, how can I fix it? What do I do? Yeah.
Right.
And so like going into the observation, I always in my head, I'm like, all right, you got to make sure like you sell yourself. You got this. But then it just happens so naturally that I'm like, I don't even need to sell it that hard because I'm doing my shit the right way. Like, I know it. I'm experienced. And I look at this the reason I bring this up is because this is my 6th year in the classroom. And with the turnover and the attrition rates for teachers, like, they're low. So a lot of teachers are in their 1st or 2nd year. 6 years is longer than I intended to teach, but here I am. And you have your 20, 30-year veterans. And I think that when you look at like time in, you're doing a disservice to the energy, the effort, the intention, because there are people who have been teaching for 20 years and they ain't got shit on me because they don't have the intention that I have of being a good educator.
Well, and then there's that whole mentality of if you're trying to do something to chase a bag, you're never going to be successful. And like they say that with acting all the time. They're like, if you are going into acting, performance, any type of creativity and art, if your mentality is I want to be famous, you will never be famous ever.
Yeah.
You have to do it because you're passionate about it.
Mm-hmm. And that's
you'll be infamous, and you don't want that. Mm-hmm.
Pass. I try to take that mentality into the classroom, but also into my business, because to me, I know like I might not have, years and years worth. I just registered my LLC 5 months ago. It's not to say like Barrio is a well-established business, but it is a business that is led with intention and it is led with, integrity. And to me, that makes me stand out. And so my whole thing is like, if you're going to go into something as a professional or even an unprofessional professional, like do it right and you will see the reward. You will see the payoff.
Right. I think that plays a lot with you specifically, because from my perspective, from somebody who's viewed your content and seen what you've done and wants to actively participate in your neighborhood, like in your community that you've created, you're not just like, this is my product, please buy this from me. It's this is how this product is made. This is what goes into it. This is what I'm doing. Let me teach you more about it. And you're not trying to go, give me your money. You're trying to engage with them on a one-on-one level, because you understand that you can buy this thing from me and go away and get it from 100 other places, or you can resonate with me specifically and continue to come back and understand that I'm not doing this to take your paycheck. I will, because that's how I pay my bills, but because you're putting money into this, this is what you're getting out of it. This is what you're seeing. And I think that's a huge difference. And there's this complete joint, like you said, with you don't separate anything. So you are being your professional self while still being your unprofessional self. And we talked about code switching and everything. There isn't that in the way that you run your business. It is literally just like, this is me. This is my heart that I'm pouring into everything. And the people that are like, well, I don't like it, you go, okay, but why? And then when they give you a stupid answer, or when they say like, I just don't think it's clean enough, you go, all right, well, this is how I do it.
And it's just it. Not for you then. I mean, because my thing is, I know for a fact. So I recently entered a stage of business ownership where I feel comfortable saying no to projects that I don't want to do.
That is the greatest feeling in the world, isn't it?
Yes, it is. As a business owner, as a helper, I feel really guilty. But one of the things that I'm getting better at is noticing when projects don't align with my vision or align with my end goal. Because I'm not that person who's like, I just want to take your money. Like, I could do things that I'm not passionate about, take your money and move on with my life. But I want to work with clientele who, like I said, they keep coming back. They keep, I have clients who we text now and we're talking about like skincare or, what they're doing for their fiance to surprise that. Like, I pride myself on the fact that my clients turn into friends, because to me, it speaks to the level of care that comes from my brand. Like, it's built into my brand. It's not because I just like you or because we happen to click or you hired me and you paid me a lot of money. Like
you're not buying the friendship. They're buying the product. The friendship is the bonus.
Right. And it just, to me, it speaks to the fact that my brand is established enough to be attracting the clients that are going to be repeat customers and that are going to really align with my brand. And since I've come to that realization, I feel comfortable saying, you know what? Thank you so much for reaching out to me about this project. I'm not going to lie. I usually make up like a BS excuse about why I can't do it because I'm still like a giver in that sense. I'm like, I just don't want to do this for you. But, you know, sometimes I'll be honest and just say like, hey, I don't really think this project is up my alley, but here's a bunch of people who I think could.
Right.
You know, like I'm really big on the referral because I'm like, I don't want to do this, or I don't have the capacity to do this, or I don't have the skills to do it, but I did some research and here's what you can do instead.
Well, and then at the same time, that also says a lot because that there's a difference between going, I can't help you, this person can, and recognizing I'm not at that stage yet in my business and then sending them where that is, because that means they'll still come to you because who knows, a year down the line, you may be able to do what they asked for. Absolutely. And then you can continue from there. But anytime that you reach out to someone and they're like, no, I can't help you, and that's the end of the conversation, I have no interest in communicating with them more. Like, but when they give you...
Good. I'm glad you can't do it.
Right, because it's not your fault. You know what I mean? Like, it's not the person asking for its fault that they can't do this thing, unless they're just like a douche. But that's completely different. But if you physically can't help them and they're interested in investing the time and the money in this, you'll direct them to someone else, and that's super important, especially among this network of small businesses that you pass people. And then
when I say that I'm saying no to projects that I don't want to do, it's projects that are not personal and don't have that like personal tie to them. Because I'm not gonna lie, I get my fair share of inquiries from people who are like, I just want something that's cheap and fast. And I'm like, I am neither cheap nor fast.
Not those things.
Like, that's not this. And, you know, a couple of months ago, I would not have been able to confidently say, hey, that's just not really what I do, because my clientele is a client who, you know, they come and they're like, we met at this restaurant and the restaurant has Spanish tiles, and so we want to incorporate Spanish tiles in our design. Like that shit makes me like, I'm like, oh, okay, yes, I got it, I'm on it.
Well, it makes you a storyteller, and I think this part of the reason that you and I are as close as we are through this whole camp experience is we are both teachers, but not in the literal sense of like, I'm going to put you in my classroom. It's more of the we've acknowledged that our entire purpose in life is to help share knowledge with other people of some kind. And the way you do everything says a lot to that, but that makes us helpers by need. And there's a very difficult thing that every helper has to come to the point where they realize that saying no isn't always a bad thing, because I can help as many people as I want, but if I have to sacrifice and hurt myself to help someone, it's not going to do anything. And you 100%. have to reserve that energy and do those things. And I want to storytell. I want to create something. I want someone to go, my favorite color is blue. I like this particular flower. I like this thing. And I'm trying to make it personal for this person, because then I have complete free reign to take what they've given me and create this story for them. And I feel right. And for you, it gets to be this long process of building it and doing it. And I'm sure it's that initial moment, just like at a wedding, where the groom or bride sees their significant other at the end of the road, and it just tears because you've taken all of the things that they love and said and put it into this paper that they can cherish. Because that's another thing about Letterpress that you've explained, is that they last forever.
Yes. And that's my biggest thing, is that when I design, nothing that I design is meant for you to keep, right? Like, you don't order 150 wedding invitations and then hoard them in your closet for 30 years, right? You're passing along this sentiment. And if your guest or intended guest will take this wedding invitation and say, oh my God, I love this, I'm going to tuck it away and like as a keepsake, then I've done my job correctly. Like, I really pride myself on creating materials that are lasting, quality, so that they can be heirlooms, because I'm that like sappy human that's like, oh my God,
I'm right there with you.
This is my like umbilical cord. I'm like, that's fucking gross, but I have it.
Like first tooth hair.
That's what I'm banking on when I'm designing, is I want to do stuff that is memorable, so that you have like a flashbulb memory of, oh my God, when this envelope came in the mail, I literally dropped everything on the floor because I was like, what the fuck is this? Like, that is the experience that I want to create for my clients. And I have this is a perfect example. The other day we mailed out these save the dates for a wedding that, it's kind of up in the air if the wedding's going to happen right now.
Thanks, Rona.
Yeah, right. And the bride was texting me like screenshots of her friends' reactions to the save the dates for like a solid week. And I was just like, she's like, I know you probably appreciate the validation as much as I do. And I was like, fuck yes, keep them coming. Like, my preference for this type of experience is that you feel like you had a part in it.
That's so exciting that you have built this iPad created image that has now become this little business for you. And then another thing about that that's really important is that Hispanic and Latin culture in general is very big on memories and remembering things. And I mean, you got to think like Dia de los Muertos, which is literally just like they are gone, but we remember them, and this is why. And as long as we remember them, they will live on. And that is 100% like, that is Barrio. That is, it's where it is. It's ready to go. And like, I think that's fantastic. So what's next?
So ideally what's next is I really want to step up my game in terms of attracting that ideal client. I don't want to be booked and busy. I want to be like booked and entertained. Like I want to have things to do consistently. And I think that that's going to come along with like continuing to show up as me, continuing to solidify my offering. So right now I'm kind of getting into a sweet spot where I'm eliminating stuff that I don't want to do, as well as like figuring out how to do the things that I do want to do really well. And so like with my branding clients, I'm actually going to be breaking that off entirely into like its own company eventually. Because when branding clients come to me, they're like, I need a logo, I need assets, I need this. I'm an English teacher, so people end up paying me to write their copy. And then I'm like, oh, who's going to build your website? And they're like, do you build websites? I'm like, yep. So, it's something that's developing further and further, but I'm still like, I want to play with paper. So like, let me chill on that a little bit, but it is forthcoming, and I see where it's going to like naturally develop into that. A funny story about like what's next is that my business is actually like formally titled Barrio Letterpress Collective, because ideally I will get to a place where we are a collective of smaller brands, right?
That's what I was just going to ask. I was like, you're trying to build your brand to keep everything in the neighborhood, if you will.
Yes, exactly. And my husband and I joke around that we're going to have like our own little compound, and it's going to be like the Barrio Brews. Like that's going to be our cold brew store. And like, just we definitely see a place where this could grow into something much bigger than just like paper specific goods. And I'm okay with that. Right now I'm comfortable with like the paper world. But I do see where, people need copywriters, people need like life coaching. Like first let me get my shit together, but
don't steal my job. That's my gig.
Sorry, my bad.
My gig.
Community over competition, boo-boo.
Right, 100%.
But no, I just, I see it going into a place where this feel-good vibe, it could be, I work with event planners, I work with photographers, like my husband's a DJ, there's just so much stuff that we could do that's specific to events. And I get so excited that sometimes I have to like sit down and take a breather. I'm like, ooh, I just went a little too That's So Raven into this, like what's coming. But I'm really content with where I'm at right now.
So,
we're gonna be stopping.
Where can people find you?
You can find me at www.barrioletterpress.com for my website. Please send all inquiries to my website. I don't answer DM inquiries. But you can also follow me on Instagram at Barrio Press. That's BARRIO Press, like a letterpress. And I'm also on Facebook. So I'm on all of your platforms.
What is one thing that you would tell someone who wants to do something and someone who's looking at this and like, well, I'm not professional enough to do this? What's the one thing that you would tell them?
The one thing that I would tell them is that your view of what makes you a professional is probably not right.
Oh.
Sorry. But realistically, I think we're way harsher judges of ourselves than other people are of us. And oftentimes an entrepreneur has like a very driven mindset, has a very perfectionist view of things. And so you have to get out of your own way. And you know, if you want to know if you're professional enough to do something, ask somebody, would you pay me to do this? Like, do you think that this service is worth money? Do research. Don't be afraid to look up like your market, see if there's a market for the thing that you're offering. You know, and that's how you determine if you're a professional or not. And when you start to don't let imposter syndrome get in your way. It's something I'm practicing myself. But realistically, that voice in your head that's saying like, I'm not a professional at this, that's imposter syndrome. And so kick that bitch to the curb. We have no time for it. You have things to do. Make it happen.
Thank you again to Chloe for being a part of this interview with us. And there's a few different things that I want to discuss with you guys now that are kind of like my biggest takeaways from what happened. One, you don't have to be a professional. You don't have to have a professional degree to be successful. You can do you with the opportunities that are given to you. Two, the only thing you have to do to be successful and to be a professional or expert at what you're doing is be one step ahead of your consumer. You just have to be one step ahead of the people that are going to be purchasing from you. And that's not that hard. If you have a skill, if you have something that you want to do, take Chloe's advice, which is the best advice she had ever on anything in this. If you want to know if somebody is willing to support your industry, if you have something that you can do to be successful, ask them if they're willing to pay for it. Don't be afraid to put yourself out there and ask that question. So that's brilliant, and thank you to Chloe for bringing that up. Success is defined by your intention. It's not you have to reach this certain threshold to be considered successful. You don't have to have $1 million to be considered successful. It's your intention behind it. If you're trying to be successful purely for the sake of having money, it's never going to work. You're never going to have enough to fill that. But if you are trying to teach and offer a service like Chloe is trying to connect and build something personal with people, something that is an heirloom and triggers memories. That is her intention, and because she knows what her intention is when she's going into it, she has every ability to be successful. So those are the 4 things that I want you guys to remember when you're trying to define how to be a successful person, what you can do to be a professional. And thank you again to Chloe for being here. All of her information is in the description box below. Please be sure to check her out. Go to her shop, go to her website, and see all the things that she does through Barrio. It's really amazing work, and I would love to see her thrive for the next time that she comes back, so she can tell us how Barrio is growing in the time from this interview to her next interview. If you like everything that we do here at Redhead Runaway, please hit that like and subscribe button. It really does help the channel out, and it lets me know what type of content you like seeing from us here. If you would like to get more personal things sent directly to you, tips, tricks, deals, and bonuses, be sure to sign up for our newsletter at redheadrunaway.com/newsletter or in the description box below. And we will see you next time we put a video out on the internet. Okay, bye!